You've seen it. I mean, I guarantee you've seen it within the last week. You're driving down Main Street or maybe pulling into an industrial park, and there it is. That now hiring sign taped to the glass door.
Oh, yeah, the faded one.
Exactly. The ink is totally faded by the sun. The tape is curling up at the corners. It's been up there for like 6 months, maybe 2 years. And if you walk inside and actually talk to the person who put that sign up, you will inevitably hear this phrase that has basically become a modern cultural mantra. They'll say, nobody wants to work anymore.
Right. It's a statement that just permeates everything right now, from small-town diners to the boardrooms of massive logistics firms. It's binary, it assigns blame, and quite frankly, it is deeply comforting for the people saying it.
Well, yeah, because if the problem is just an invisible, unmotivated workforce, then the business owner doesn't have to look inward.
Precisely. They don't have to change a thing.
But when you actually start looking at the mechanics of what is happening inside these businesses, that faded sign tells a completely different story. So today, we are taking you on a deep dive into the operational reality behind those empty storefronts.
And we have a great source for this.
We do. We're using a really fascinating document by John F. Hendershot called The Companies That Will Win the Labor Crisis. And the mission here is to decode what surviving businesses are actually doing right now to thrive. We want to tear down that emotionally satisfying but dangerously incomplete lie that nobody wants to work.
Because relying on that idea is a fast track to irrelevance.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just a temporary hiring hiccup. It's not a blip.
Not even close, right?
Right. To ground this in some hard data from the source, there's a joint study by Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute, and it paints a really stark picture. Just between 2024 and 2033, manufacturers alone are projected to need 3.8 million additional workers.
Wow, 3.8 million.
Yeah, and up to 1.9 million of those positions could go completely unfilled if current trends continue. And this isn't isolated to just manufacturing, you know. We're talking about construction, logistics, skilled trades, HVAC. It's everywhere.
Just to put that HVAC thing in perspective for a second, I mean, if you are sitting at home in mid-July and your air conditioning unit dies, the labor shortage suddenly isn't just an economic statistic anymore.
No, it becomes very personal.
Yeah, it means you might be waiting 3 weeks in 90-degree heat for a technician because the local company simply does not have the manpower to dispatch anyone to your house.
That is the daily lived reality of this data. It is a fundamental economic durability crisis. And, well, to understand how we climb out of this hole, we first have to examine why the previous system collapsed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why did it collapse?
Well, the uncomfortable truth is that many of these businesses, like the ones currently struggling the most, they were never actually built on robust, bulletproof systems to begin with.
Wait, hold on. How can you say they weren't systemized? I mean, some of these are multi-million-dollar companies that have been operating profitably for 30, 40 years. You don't survive that long without some kind of system in place.
You do if you substitute systems with a culture of sheer hustle and tribal knowledge. For decades, these companies functioned beautifully on the surface. But if you popped the hood, they weren't running on documented procedures or resilient organizational structures.
So what were they running on?
They relied almost entirely on the relationships that the founder had built over 30 years. They relied on constant mandatory overtime to cover inefficiencies. And crucially, they relied on a generation of workers who were willing to tolerate extreme instability in exchange for a paycheck.
Oh, right. It sounds like they relied on that one guy, let's call him Bob. Every industrial company has a Bob.
Every single one.
Right, he's been there for 40 years. There was no manual for the 1998 stamping machine on the floor, but Bob knows that if you hit a specific valve with a wrench at exactly 2:15 p.m., the machine won't jam.
Bob is the perfect encapsulation of this. Bob is not an employee in that scenario. Bob's the operating system.
Huh.
And the crisis hitting these companies right now is that the Bobs of the world are aging out.
They're retiring.
Exactly. When Bob leaves, the company suddenly discovers that without him, the business itself literally does not know how to function. They don't have a manual. They just had Bob.
So what does this all mean? It means the business was never truly systemized. It was just carried on the backs of exhausted people. It's almost like trying to run a brand new application on a completely obsolete piece of hardware.
That's a great way to put it.
You have this old smartphone, and for years it made calls just fine. But now you're trying to download a modern app, which in this case is the modern workforce, you know, the younger generation of employees.
Right.
And every time you try to open the new app, the phone freezes, it overheats, and it crashes. The business owner is staring at the screen yelling, "These new apps are terrible, they don't work." But the app isn't the problem. The hardware is fundamentally incapable of running it.
And that fragility is the real threat here. The greatest danger to these traditional hustle-based companies isn't the competitor down the street. It is their own internal vulnerability.
Because they're just one retirement away from disaster.
Exactly. A business depending on one exhausted founder, a shrinking pool of legacy workers, and undocumented tribal knowledge is constantly one sudden illness or one retirement away from total operational paralysis.
Okay, so if the old hardware is obsolete and relying on that exhausted old guard's hustle is a dead end, how are the surviving companies adapting?
They are making a massive identity shift. They have to stop being just employers and become talent development organizations.
What does that actually look like on the ground, though?
It requires abandoning a core 20th century assumption. For 100 years, the foundational assumption of hiring was we hire already developed people. The expectation was that the public education system, or maybe a competitor, would spend the time and money to fully train a worker.
And then the company would just swoop in and purchase that ready-made talent right off the shelf.
Right. But the new mandate is the realization that the shelf is empty. We must develop people ourselves. We have to shift from buying talent to building it.
I hear you on the theory, but let's look at the example the source provides for this, which is Toyota's FAME program, the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education.
Yes, a perfect example.
Toyota realized the skilled workers they needed didn't exist, so they built a program combining classroom education with hands-on manufacturing experience. But that is great for a massive multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate. How on earth does a regional plumbing company with 15 employees afford to build workers from scratch?
That sounds financially impossible, right?
Yeah, it sounds totally impossible for a small business.
It is a valid concern, and it is why smaller companies are having to radically rethink their isolation.
Yeah.
You are right, a 15-person plumbing company cannot build a university, but they can form consortiums with other local trades.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they can partner directly with local community colleges to sponsor specific curriculums. The core mechanism of the Toyota FAME program isn't about having billions of dollars. It is about the structure of the training.
How so?
In the FANUPI program, students typically spend 2 days a week in a classroom learning the underlying theory, robotics, fluid power, mechanics, and then 3 days a week on the actual factory floor applying it.
And they earn a wage while they are learning the theory, right?
Yes, exactly. They're getting advanced manufacturing credentials, they're integrating into the company culture immediately, and they often graduate with zero student debt.
Which is huge today.
Massive. And smaller companies can replicate this on a micro scale through formal, structured apprenticeships. Instead of poaching a journeyman plumber from a rival company for $3 more an hour, which just creates a wage war, they hire someone with zero experience and build a 3-year roadmap for them to become a journeyman.
This really highlights how absurd this standard corporate hiring approach has become. You have all these companies complaining about a severe drought of talent, but they absolutely refuse to plant any seeds.
They just won't do it.
They sit there looking at the front door, waiting for a unicorn to walk in, someone with 10 years of exact hyper-specific experience who requires zero onboarding and will somehow still accept an entry-level wage.
And if a company's new mandate is to build that talent rather than wait for the unicorn, the entire mechanism of how they filter and select candidates has to be completely dismantled.
Because you can't use the same old checkboxes.
No. You can no longer rely on applicant tracking systems, the HR software that filters resumes, to demand 10 years of experience in a specific software program.
But if we're tossing out resumes and ignoring past experience, how does a hiring manager practically sort through hundreds of applicants? I mean, you still need some kind of filter. What are they actually looking for?
They are filtering for demonstrated character. The source points to Schneider Electric as a prime example of this.
Oh, right, the veteran programs.
Yes, they aggressively invest in apprenticeships and veteran transition programs, deliberately targeting people who do not have traditional industry backgrounds. I mean, a military veteran might not know the first thing about electrical grids or commercial HVAC systems.
Right, and the HR software would immediately reject their resume because it doesn't see the keyword commercial HVAC, it just sees infantry.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that the automated filters systematically reject the exact people who possess the foundational traits these companies desperately need.
The character traits.
Yes, software cannot measure discipline. It cannot assess humility, reliability, coachability, grit, or a deep sense of responsibility.
All the things you actually want in an employee.
Exactly. Schneider Electric recognized that if their internal training pipeline is world-class, they don't need someone who already knows the technical skills. They need someone who has the psychological foundation to learn those skills quickly and reliably.
So it's less like traditional corporate hiring and more like a professional sports team drafting an athlete.
How do you mean?
Well, if you are an NFL team with an incredible coaching staff, you don't necessarily need to draft a college player who already knows your specific complex playbook. You draft based on raw athleticism, field vision, and coachability. You tell the player, we will teach you our system, you just bring the raw potential and the grit.
That is the exact mechanism. You trust your internal systems to impart the technical knowledge, so you hire for character.
Okay, I am going to play the skeptic again because I know exactly what is going through the mind of a business owner listening to this right now.
Go for it.
Let's say I do all of this. I ignore the resume. I hire for character. I spend 2 years and tens of thousands of dollars training this person from scratch. What is to stop them from taking those shiny new skills and just jumping ship to my biggest competitor across town who offers them 50 cents more an hour? It is the classic fear, right? I am just subsidizing the training for my competition.
It is the most common fear I encounter, and honestly, it is entirely justified if a company only changes its training methods without fundamentally changing its ownership structure and culture.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, if you treat an employee as a rented asset, they will act like a rented asset and leave for a higher rental fee. This is where the conversation has to shift from training to the psychology of ownership. The source material pulls in some vital research from the National Center for Employee Ownership, the NCEO, specifically focusing on ESOPs.
Hold on, let's define that clearly for the listener. I know ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan, but the source specifically mentions S Corporation ESOPs retaining staff at massive rates. What makes the S Corp part of that so critical to keeping a 22-year-old worker from leaving?
It comes down to the mechanics of wealth building. An S corporation is a tax structure where the company itself doesn't pay federal income tax. Instead, the tax liability passes through to the owners.
Okay.
Now, if the company is 100% owned by an ESOP, which is a qualified retirement trust for the employees, that trust is tax exempt.
Wait, really? Meaning that the company is suddenly paying zero federal and often zero state income tax?
Yes, zero. And that frees up massive amounts of cash flow. Successful ESOPs use that cash to reinvest in the business, pay off debt, and crucially, fund the employees' retirement accounts at levels far beyond standard 401k match.
That is incredible.
So, to answer your question about the 22-year-old worker leaving, during massive disruptions like the COVID-19 pandemic, ESOP companies were 3 to 4 times more likely to retain their staff.
Wow.
Furthermore, voluntary quit rates at S corporation ESOPs are roughly 1/3 of the national average.
1/3. I mean, that isn't just a slight improvement. That is an impenetrable moat around your talent pool.
Because the psychology shifts entirely. The worker isn't just creating hours for a flat wage anymore. They are seeing the direct financial benefit of their efficiency and hard work compounding in their own retirement accounts. The core psychological principle driving this retention is deeply human. People protect what they help build.
Right. If they own a piece of the machine, they aren't going to let Bob hit it with a wrench anymore. They're going to want to figure out the actual manual.
Exactly. They're going to write the manual themselves. This highlights a fundamental disconnect between employers and younger workers today. Many employers operate under the assumption that the labor shortage is purely a compensation puzzle. Just find the right hourly rate and people will stay.
But it's not that simple.
No.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, compensation absolutely matters, obviously. But younger workers are evaluating potential employers using an entirely different set of metrics. They are asking a much deeper, almost existential question. They're asking, can I build a life here?
Can I build a life here? That is a really heavy question to bring to a job interview for a logistics firm.
But it is what they are asking. They are searching for meaning, stability, dignity, and a sense of community. They want to know there is a visible pathway forward.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source document brings up a concept that ties directly into this visible pathway, and they call it leadership as punishment. When I read that, it completely reframed how I view corporate advancement.
It's a powerful concept.
Right. We expect these young, newly trained workers to want to climb the corporate ladder. The traditional promise is work hard, put in the hours, and one day you can be the manager. But look at it from the perspective of a young worker on the factory floor today. They look up the ladder, and what do they actually see?
They see a cautionary tale.
Exactly. They see supervisors who look 10 years older than they actually are. They see burned out managers answering emails at 11:00 p.m. and dealing with angry owners. They see constant mandatory overtime. They see people whose marriages and family lives are buckling under the sheer weight of the company's lack of systems.
And they want no part of it.
Why on earth would a 22-year-old volunteer for that? Why would you want a promotion if the tangible reward is a stress-induced health crisis at age 50? You can't build a future workforce through fear.
No, you can't. When a business is carried on the backs of people rather than supported by resilient systems, leadership inevitably becomes nothing more than the burden of carrying more weight. You certainly cannot build a workforce by making leadership look like a prison sentence.
So how do you fix that?
To transition to a model where people actually want to advance, you have to offer flexibility where operationally possible. You have to build structured advancement pathways so they know exactly how to reach the next level without just waiting for someone to retire.
You have to restore dignity to the work itself, which really shifts the entire framing of this deep dive. We started by looking at those faded now hiring signs and the terrifying statistics of millions of unfilled jobs in critical sectors.
Right.
But diving into Toyota's training mechanics, Schneider Electric's character-based hiring, and the sheer retention power of an ESOP reveals something much deeper about our economy.
It reveals that the prevailing narrative is fundamentally flawed. America does not merely have a labor shortage. We are suffering from a mentorship shortage. We have a massive transfer of knowledge shortage. And, perhaps most profoundly, we have a meaning shortage.
A meaning shortage, that's a great way to put it.
The companies that are going to dominate the next 2 decades, the ones that will survive the demographic cliff of the retiring baby boomers, they won't be the ones who somehow magically discover better workers hiding in the shadows. They will be the ones who actively engineer themselves into better builders of people.
And this changes your entire scorecard as a listener. Whether you are listening to this as an employee weighing a new job offer, or maybe you're a manager staring at an understaffed department wondering how to fix it, you shouldn't just be negotiating a starting wage anymore.
No, the wage is just the baseline.
Right. You need to be looking for or actively creating a system. You have to ask, where is the structured apprenticeship? Where is the visible pathway for advancement? Does this company's culture actually respect the people doing the heavy lifting?
It demands a complete reevaluation of what makes a business fundamentally sound. It is no longer just about the quality of the product. It is deeply tied to the environment in which that product is created.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on long after this audio stops. Think about the companies you interact with daily, or perhaps the one you currently work for. If a company's balance sheet grows year after year, but the people inside that company remain completely stagnant, exhausted, and undeveloped, is that actually a successful business?
Or is it just a highly successful extraction machine?
Exactly. What if the ultimate, definitive measure of a company's true market dominance over the next 20 years isn't its profit margin, but simply the measurable personal and professional growth of its lowest paid employee? Keep that in mind the next time you drive past one of those faded, now hiring signs peeling in the sun.